Dorothy?
I use Dottie mostly. D-O-T-T-I has been mostly what I've used as my byline and everything else.
Okay, so that was your byline name.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So first, let's just start off. You know, you worked for the News-Journal for 22 years, you said?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so do you remember what years those were?
I guess I started in, what was it, 1952?
Dottie, why don't we talk a little about, first of all, just, you know, all the things you did in your career. What are some of your biggest highlights, I guess, from your time at the News-Journal?
Oh, gosh. I got to do so many things. I got to learn how to fly a Piper Cub, just because it was available. I flew with the Blue Angels. I'm an honorary Blue Angel. But I actually talked with 3 presidents, which I'm really excited about putting that on the record. Things that came up, I never had a boring assignment, let me put it that way. It was an extremely lucky job, you know. All the things that happened were just so much excitement in them, you know.
Well, who were the presidents that you got to meet?
John F. Kennedy was the main one. Jimmy Carter, that was when I was working at Embry-Riddle. Jimmy Carter, and I briefly talked to Ford.
Take me back to Daytona Beach in the 50s. I mean, obviously a lot different than it is today. Looking at Daytona Beach today and back then, I mean, what did it look like? I mean, what was kind of going on here around then?
It seems like pretty much the same things, except it kept growing and growing and getting more modern, of course. But when you're living in it and growing with it, it doesn't fall on you so much as, you know, if you just suddenly, you're gone for a couple of years and come back, then that's when you notice the biggest changes then. Yeah. And of course, the race issues were big, and that's what brought Mary McLeod Bethune here and helped a great deal in that one.
So that's, you know, why we're doing the story today is we're talking about, you know, Bethune-Cookman, the statue
right.
with her that is going to be in D.C. And just kind of talking to you, had the chance to meet her.
Oh gosh, yes. I was so lucky. And it was really kind of odd because I got an assignment to interview Eleanor Roosevelt when I was at the News-Journal. And it just so turned out that she's was a great friend of Mary McLeod Bethune's, and was staying at Mary McLeod Bethune's home. So I met Mary McLeod Bethune while I was interviewing Eleanor Roosevelt.
Wow. So talk to me about, what was she like? I mean, was she, you know, she's made out to be such just a generous person. What was she like to meet?
Very ordinary person. I mean, she's friendly. She you know, talks to you about ordinary things, and so did Eleanor Roosevelt. It wasn't like you were talking to a lot of people who think, oh, well, I'm so-and-so, you got to be polite to me. She was ordinary and very, 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 very friendly. And the funniest thing of all is that halfway through the conference, through the meeting, Eleanor was getting dressed to go to speak to whatever she was speaking, some event that had to do with child care and stuff. But all of a sudden, she stopped in the middle of the conversation and said, I forgot to bring my curlers. And you know, that was the last thing I would expect, you know, in the middle of an interview. And very calmly, Mary McLeod Bethune says, don't worry about it. I'll call one of the students and get him to bring over his pair.
Oh my God.
And that's what happened. She called a student, and the student came over with curlers. And while I'm interviewing Eleanor, she's curling up her hair. I mean, it wasn't like these were special people, although they were just ordinary, very friendly people.
Wow.
And it was just kind of amazing. If I were that student, I would never touch those curlers again. I would put them in a box. But I can imagine if she said Eleanor Roosevelt used these curlers, nobody would believe her. Except I think I mentioned it in my story.
That is so cool. So that was your impression. You know, she obviously made a very lasting impact here in Daytona Beach.
Oh, yes.
What was she like seen as, I guess, you know, in Daytona Beach at this time?
Well, at first it was wonder at the time. At first, people was told not to go to her house, you know, and things like that. I mean, I had lunch with her once on her porch, and a lot of people told me, "Oh, don't go to her house, don't go to her house. People will never talk to you again if you go to her house." That's how bad racism was back then, you know. And so it was completely different, you know, that was much, much worse. I hate to think it's going backwards again, but she made a lot of common sense at Bethune-Cookman, and she did some interesting events. The other one I sat through, I will tell you about when I was covering City Hall, which I thought was kind of amazing, and it had an effect. They were going to build a back door to Peabody Auditorium because African Americans weren't allowed in Peabody, and they were going to build a back door just for them. And I was covering City Hall at the time, and there's Mary McLeod Bethune. You know, she comes marching in, and she just said 3 short sentences, and I will never forget it. The first one, she was just explaining to the city commissioners that Ralph Bunche was coming to stay with her for a while, and he was won the Nobel Peace Prize, the first Black American ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And she told him he was coming to stay with her, and a symphony was coming. The London Symphony, actually, was coming every other year to Daytona Beach at the time. And she said, "I have tickets for us to the symphony. Am I to bring him in through the back door?" That was it. That's her exact words. "Am I to bring him in through the back door?" Dead silence. Dead silence in the room. And that was never brought up again. The subject was never brought up again. No answer, and that was it. I mean, how could you bring the Nobel Peace Prize winner in through the back door to see a symphony? I mean, she had it, and that's all she said, and that was the end of that. Wow. And that's one of these things I remember most about her, you know, and she did it so simply and so quietly, and yet it worked. And the things she did for the college were just amazing. I taught there for 1 year, I think. Wasn't it? It's 1 whole year, I think. Excuse me. I think it was just 1 year that I actually taught there. I have helped them with public relations and things like that. But the things that she taught the children, the students, really impressed me a lot, that she put into the curriculum. You know, the education curriculum was great, but she put in some extra helpful things for the students that I think were completely amazing at the time. And like how to get a job, you know, and things like if you're going to go apply for a job. Back in those days, companies would have open events for people to come in who were interested in jobs. They could come, and they had like little parties for them. I don't know what you would call them, so they could meet the people and talk to them. And she taught them things like, if you're going to go to a place and look for a job there, find out all about them first. Read about them right away. Find out what they're into right now, and get at least one question ready that you're going to ask them to show that you're interested in what they're doing and you know what they're doing. And then she taught them simple things like when you go to a buffet and you got a little plate of food in your hand and a drink, and someone comes over to say hello, how are you going to shake hands? And she taught them how to handle that situation I've never learned how to handle exactly, but how to handle the food and the saying hello to the chairman. And just in addition to education, she taught them and how to dress when you go for a job, and it made a big difference in their students.
So, you know, now looking at the legacy she's created, and
right.
with, you know, the statue that's going to D.C. to represent Florida, what do you think about her legacy, being one of the ones who represents our state?
I think it's perfect. I really do. Because it showed, one thing, it helped the African American for a lot, to show that they were important, not just to this one little school, but an important part of the whole city, the whole state. And the other one, you know, just to help the community at large, you know, that what this college was, you know, it's not just a little black school. It's what it grew into proved that she knew what she was doing, you know. But she did all this very calmly. That's the whole thing. I never saw her get angry and shout. I've heard her tell people that they were doing something wrong, but always nicely. She always spoke very peacefully. Never seemed to get in. I'm sure she got mad at things, everybody does, but she always explained, and she was easy to talk to, I put it that way.
Do you think Daytona would be what it is today if, she hadn't been here and done everything she did?
I don't think so. I don't think it would have made it this fast into, good race relationships and into taking black people into any kind of event or things like that. I think that she made it a lot faster. And she had no racism or of any kind in her mind. And now Bethune-Cookman is a religiously based college. I happen to be Jewish. I'm not a Christian. I wondered if they would accept me when I went to teach. She had no racism in her head at all. She was glad to have me there, And so that's one thing that she taught the students that I think spread, so that they would feel calmer, about getting out into the community. Making them a part of the community, I think, was one of the major things that she actually accomplished. But we had a lot of little, sort of private little meetings just talking about what was going on. And so I was knowing what was going on there. And then what I taught, I knew what kind of things, the practical things that she wanted the students to know, even in addition to the education. I was teaching them to write, because that's what I've done all my life. I was teaching an English class, and I did teach them how to take tests, even if they knew half of the material, how to pass the test. Little things to look at, and a teacher made tests that would give them clues, which helped them. But she wanted me to write a biography with her, right? And that's one thing I never really got to do. I wish I had, but it just didn't work out.